The problems on our doorsteps and under our feet keep mounting.
Thousands of litres of raw sewage has spewed into Wellington Harbour as
Broken pipes, congestion, a lack of homes.
Our most popular tourist resort is being filled with homeless workers, according to protesters in Queenstown.
And a lack of money.
Homeowners, brace yourselves for an average rates increase of 15%.
Ratepayers get their say at this year's local government elections, but that's if they turn out to vote. Welcome to the NBR Podcast. I'm your host, Simon Shepherd. Yes, in October, 3.6 million people are entitled to vote for a total of 78 regional and local councils. Last time, only 42% of voters actually ticked a box. So, the NBR is running a week-long series on the local elections to identify the issues. For this episode, we focus on three cities, Auckland, Wellington and Queenstown, and ask former mayors whether things have changed since they were in charge. First up, Auckland.
We have actually passed a budget that's more with relief rather than joy.
Love or hate the mayor and love or hate the place, Auckland is the engine room of New Zealand's economy. The amalgamated super city has just turned 15.
We are the one international city in New Zealand. We need to be a world-class city.
Former Labour politician Phil Goff was mayor from 2016 to 2022.
New Zealand needs Auckland. Now, other New Zealanders don't always recognise that.
That's true.
There's a degree of resentment against Auckland, but if you look at it, Auckland's a third of the country's population. It's 38% of the GDP. It's our international gateway, our internationally classed university. It is a city that can deliver for New Zealand, and we need to achieve that potential.
But is it? Is it delivering? And in the most recent Committee for Auckland report that's only just come out now, they're talking that we are lagging behind on comparative cities. And those comparative cities these days are not Sydney and Melbourne, but they are Brisbane and Vancouver and Copenhagen and Dublin. And we're lagging behind as well on sustainability, transport, house prices. So is Auckland delivering?
There are things that it is delivering on, and there are big changes that are happening now as a result of what's happened in the past.
Yep.
I'm talking about the City Rail Link, which will double rail capacity, handle up to 54,000 people an hour. We've got the Central Interceptor, which I brought forward by 10 years, which means that we will have decent quality water in our central city beaches instead of sewage overflows every time it floods.
Yep.
We've got an international convention centre that will finally open after the disaster of the fire, etc. So there are things that are moving in the right direction. There are things that aren't moving in the right direction. One of those you've just mentioned, which is transport, congestion.
Yep.
I think probably nearly 2/3 of Aucklanders believe that congestion is our biggest problem, and it is.
Yep.
And the way to deal with congestion, of course, has got to be through public transport.
Okay, so
not through new motorways, notwithstanding what
and
they're
not
former.
through congestion charging as well.
No, congestion charging has got to be part of that.
Got to be part of it to change behaviour.
Partly to change behaviour, but also to raise the revenue that you need to invest in infrastructure.
Right.
Now, the government cut the regional fuel tax.
Yes.
God knows why, apart from, well, I know why. It sounded good politically on the campaign trail, but that meant that they just pulled $1.2 billion out of the money available for Auckland's infrastructure. They're not providing that money in another way. The way that we will claw back some of that revenue will be through a congestion tax. I've supported that consistently all the way through.
So the other key to this is public transport, right? So you mentioned the CRL, which hopefully is going to be finished soon.
CRL could be a game changer.
Yeah, it could be a game changer. But there's the other issue, isn't there? There's the light rail.
Yeah,
that got scrapped by the government.
I think
because it's too expensive, right?
Well, everything's expensive, but it'll never be cheaper than it is today. Finally, something was being done, probably the biggest investment that central government has ever made in Auckland itself. And it was something that would have allowed quality intensification following the rapid transit hubs that would have catered for 25% of the future growth of Auckland's population up to 2051. I was MP for Mount Roskill for 32 years. I know those roads. I know Dominion Road. I know Sandringham Road. I know Manukau Road. Yeah. Those roads are all now facing bus congestion.
Yeah.
So you can't bus your way out of it. There are no rail lines that connect that part of the isthmus. That's a big flaw. One other thing that light rail would have done is that you would have then had a full public transport rapid transit network around the city.
Let's talk intensification then. What do you think about the way the city has been intensifying since you've left?
I support intensification of a high quality.
Yeah.
You have to have intensification. When I ran for mayor in 2016, I said this city has got to build up as well as out. I didn't exclude out because one of the other problems you mentioned before is the cost of housing in Auckland.
Yeah.
That's prohibitive for a new generation of homeowners. And that's because we haven't had a supply of housing that matched demand.
Yeah.
And planning was part of that. The unitary plan was transformational for Auckland. We were ahead of anywhere else in New Zealand. And I support the idea of intensification, but it's got to be done with sufficient green space. It's got to be done in a way that you're not creating slums of the future. So it's got to be of good quality.
Yep.
That means that you're planning for the future, not doing everything on a short 3-year electoral cycle, which has been one of the things that has damned Auckland and New Zealand over the entireness of my political life here.
Okay, let's talk about relationship with central government then. I mean, does Auckland need someone who is really feisty and independent? Do you think that you were too close to the government mechanism when you were in?
No, I understood how central government worked, and that meant that we were able to get from central government a whole lot more on things like the Auckland Transport Alignment Project.
Okay.
Record sums of money that went into transport infrastructure. We would have got with light rail even higher amounts.
How do you pay for this? Okay, so rates. Okay, they can only go up so far. So how do you pay for it? You can't. All this infrastructure that we need.
Well, you can borrow for infrastructure. You can't borrow to pay for the groceries. And we had a clear line on that when I was mayor. I did 6 budgets, all passed with a 2/3 majority. All were responsible. We had the lowest rate rises in the city. There's something else that we need too.
What's that?
Because you've got to have some form of devolution of funding. The government bravely in 2010 decided to go out and create a super city, but they did not change the system of funding for that city. The government raises 93% of all public taxes go to central government, 7% go to all the local governments across the country. So you've got to have a way of devolution of funding,
right?
Particularly when you've created a large-scale city like Auckland that's professionally run.
So GST, right? Does the council deserve a share of GST in some form?
They should get the whole of the GST back on rates.
On rates.
Because the government, and I was part of that government, so I'm not blaming anybody else, the government put GST across the board, made sense at the time, it was uniform, it was easy. That included on rates. So when our rates go up, the government percentage of what they take out of those rates on GST goes up as well.
Yeah.
Now, that is local money raised locally, should be spent locally, easy, equitable, to return that to local governments across the country and give us a chance to do more for ourselves rather than going cap in hand to the government saying we want more money.
But there's one last point on the funding. So the government is looking at doing a regional deal with one city this year and then maybe 2 next year. So that's a long-term funding kind of thing.
Well, I can't understand why they will not support a bed tax. Simeon Brown has come out opposed to it, and he's not the first to be opposed to it.
So you think there's other funding mechanisms rather than doing this regional deal?
That's a silly way of doing it. They might do Queenstown, they might ultimately come to Auckland, but you say, you've got to have. We have one level of government in New Zealand that makes 99% of the decisions. The other 1% are made by local government. You've got to empower local government to make local decisions that affect local people.
And so, just finally, are you optimistic about Auckland?
Oh, I'm always optimistic. You've got to be, but you've got to be realistic as well. We need to make Auckland a place where talent wants to live, because we are the one city that can stop the brain drain offshore, because we've got the scale and the size, and we can be innovative, we can be a leader in technology and education and tourism. We've got to create a decent lifestyle with environmental sustainability. We haven't even talked about flooding and what climate change is going to do. That's a massive problem that everybody's turning a blind eye to at the moment.
Yep.
I went around with a climate change minister to meet the insurance companies in London. And boy, anybody that doesn't believe climate change is happening and is going to be hugely expensive, talk to the people that are insuring the buildings that will become uninsurable within a few years. We have to do something about that, and everybody is avoiding it. We need to do it now. It'll only get worse the longer we leave it.
Now to Wellington.
If there wasn't another viable candidate, I would still run.
Sitting Mayor Tory Whānau is out because Labor's Andrew Little is running.
The council is out of touch and needs different leadership.
Whānau is the third mayor in succession to only serve one term, as the city suffers from broken pipes and deals with a depleted public service. So I guess as a former mayor, 3 terms, you look at Wellington now, how would you describe the vibe?
Well, first of all, I'm going to be really clear. I love the city, and there are lots of fantastic things about the city, but the vibe is not so good at the moment.
Kerry Prendergast was Wellington Mayor from 2001 to 2010.
There are a lot of things that aren't going so well, and the more, of course, people talk about things not going well, it becomes self-perpetuating. But there does need to be change. People are hurting in the city for a whole lot of reasons, and hopefully with change we're going to get better decision-making, and people will feel great about their city again.
That would be great. What do you think needs to change?
The leadership needs to change, and we already know that's going to change because the current mayor has announced she won't be seeking re-election. What we need, in my opinion, is a council who have a vision and who concentrate on the basics first, and then don't forget about the most vulnerable in our city, and don't forget about the people who invest their own money in business, whether it's retail, whether it's hospitality, whether it's bars, whether it's property owners. And then let's not forget the other people that are important to the city, so bringing people into the city, the arts, etc. Right. So there's a lot of things that have to happen in Wellington.
Okay. Wellington, of course, has had an observer having a look at them, and he found that the council itself is running okay, but it's really the councillors that have perpetuated this kind of idea that there's so much dysfunction there. Would you agree with that? He cited sort of leaks and criticisms. I mean, you mentioned leadership just a moment ago.
So I don't believe in party politics at local government level, but Wellington for a long time has had party politics, and it's become even more divisive, particularly the last couple. It's not just this last 3 years. We've had now 3 one-term mayors. It is very divisive, and there's a lot of infighting and a lot of block voting on commitments people have made to get elected. The current mayor made a commitment that she would pull the council together, that she would stop the infighting, and we would get decision-making across the board. That has not happened. It's really broken down. So I'm hoping that a future mayor is going to deliver on that sort of commitment, provide the unity Wellington's looking for.
Is Wellington a different kind of council, though, because you've got central government there? Does that make it a different kind of beast?
It does in a way, because government's just down the road. We have to work closely with government, and I think because Wellington tends to be a centre left-leaning sort of a town with a lot of public sector people, I think that's perpetuated the politics around the council table.
Okay, all right. I want to know where you think business fits into the mix. I mean, this is where our audience is really concerned, and there's been a lot of concern and criticism in Wellington about the fact that you have projects that are pushed ahead without consultation or thought about the ramifications for the businesses that are going to be affected. In your view, has that been a problem?
I certainly see that. I have a lot of business people talk to me about it. They're concerned that no matter how many submissions they put in, they're not listened to, that the current council's just pushed ahead with commitments they believe they made for the people that voted for them. Business in Wellington have a very big differential. They're already paying large amounts of rates compared to residential sector, and the rate take has gone up and up, the percentage the last few years. It's a wonder some of them survive. I feel for them. They are really hurting in Wellington.
But what's the way around it? Because we're talking rates are needed to pay for infrastructure, and obviously we have failing infrastructure in Wellington that's going to take so much to fix it up. So what's the way around it? Should there be other ways to fund this kind of things that we haven't been, or Wellington hasn't been bold enough to tackle? Other funding measures, other funding forms?
Look, there are, over the years, there's been lots of work done on different funding tools for local government. Funding for local government's broken. In an ideal world, you'd give back the GST. But I can't ever see a central government giving back the GST when they use it for hospitals and education and justice, etc. So to me, when you get elected, the number one job you have to do is make sure everything below the road works. And then what happens on the road works before you invest in things that are not core to what local government should be doing. Right. And we've had a succession of mayors who have not put the investment that was required below the ground into the pipes. We're not the only council in the country. There are other places around the country that haven't invested in their basic 3-water infrastructure. And I think it's also due to the fact that we're all, the cities are getting older. The infrastructure that was put in, it was expected to last 80, 90 years, hasn't lasted as long for a variety of reasons. There's been earthquakes, but there's certainly been underinvestment. And in Wellington's case, they raised enough money, but they spent it on other stuff.
Right. Okay. So back to basics is the way to go. Do you worry that there is such low voter turnout when these are issues that affect everybody every day? How do you get that kind of engagement from voters when these are essential services that affect them every day, but they're not interested?
Look, I'm hoping because of the level of disquiet, the level of media coverage on financial mismanagement, having to put a Crown Observer in, other issues Wellingtonians are concerned about, we are going to get Wellingtons turning out to vote this time. It needs some energy in the election process. They need to see which mayoral candidates are up there, what they're going to deliver. But it isn't just the mayor, it's councillors as well. So I'm hoping there will be a better turnout this time because you're absolutely right, and your audience is the business sector. When I first became mayor, the differential for every dollar a residential ratepayer paid, the commercial sector was paying more than $7, and I got it down to 2.7, which was still high. In an ideal world, if I'd been longer, we'd have got rid of it altogether. It's hard to justify. The last few councils have put it up to 3.8. So for every dollar residential ratepayer pays, you have a 3.8% multiplier for the business sector. Right. That is tough when you put the rates up such big amounts. No wonder so many of them are finding it hard to survive.
But do you have any hope for Wellington? I mean, we're not going to write it off, are we?
Of course. Of course I've got hope for Wellington. It's a magic city. You can walk everywhere. It's compact. It's got everything you'd want in a major city. We've got great quality of life. There's good public transport. I'd like to see this government, the central government, telling workers they have to go back to work in town and not have the choice of working from home, because that really impacts small retailers as well. And I want Wellingtonians to start talking up their city again, feel good about their city, the local authority to put on events so that Wellingtonians turn out, people come to our city, support tourism, support business, and make sure all of us feel good at the end of the day.
Our final stop on this local government podcast journey is the adventure capital.
Welcome to Queenstown.
The marketing is magnificent, the population is expanding, and post-COVID, the visitors are back.
Locals in the tourism industry tell me that the dollars have recovered quite nicely.
Jim Boult was the Queenstown Lakes Mayor from 2016 and throughout the pandemic.
Although the numbers aren't quite where they were. Now, that's not a bad thing where we're concerned, because we actually prefer slightly fewer higher spending tourists. If the numbers come back and the spend stays where it is, then that's got to be really good for us. But look, Queenstown is largely recovered and back where it was pre-COVID.
Have the issues also stayed the same then?
Yes, they have. Our problem comes back down to the rapid growth of the population and the rapid growth of tourist numbers here. Our population has been increasing at around 6 or 7% per annum for longer than I can remember. And if you calculate that out, the population kind of doubles in 10 or 12 years every year. We're currently in the district sitting at about 50,000 permanent residents. We're likely to be somewhere around 110,000 by the mid-2030s. That puts us about the same size as Dunedin. Now, that's great. We are a very attractive place to live. That's why so many people move here. But that brings with it a significant cost in constructing infrastructure.
Yeah.
And keeping up with the maintenance of infrastructure.
Yeah.
So look, our biggest problem is, and it's a good problem to have from the point of view of growth, but it's about how you fund the effects of growth.
Okay. So this was an issue, obviously, for when you were in the chair. You campaigned for a bed tax or a tourism levy to be put on visitors to help pay for some of this infrastructure strain that the sort of the tourism and the population growth is placing. You pulled it during COVID, but do you believe that should be back on the agenda?
Oh, totally. Look, anywhere you go in the world, you pay some sort of bed tax, some sort of tourism levy. It is just something people expect these days. We were proposing a 5% tax on the accommodation cost only. And back in my time, that equated to roughly $5 per person per night. Cup of coffee, less than a cup of coffee these days.
Yeah, that's true.
A lot of people said to me, it'll put people off coming here. My response to that was, if $5 puts you off coming here, maybe we don't want you. It is just such a no-brainer, Simon.
Yeah.
It would not make an iota of difference to the number of people coming here. And again, at the time I was there, it was going to produce around $25 million a year for the local council to do some of the work that's required. Now, it's not the be-all and the end-all. It doesn't fix everything. But, gee, you can forward borrow on that and do a lot of the outstanding infrastructure works that are required. So count me as an avid supporter of the bed tax.
So to service that tourism industry, as you say, you need people, and people need to live somewhere. And Queenstown has had a chronic housing shortage in terms of the affordable class for a long time. Can you see any way of easing that? I mean, I think back in 2023, you needed 3,000 affordable homes. I'm sure that's just gone up since then.
Oh, totally. Problem not solved. Again, it's a flow-on effect of the growth of tourism and permanent population here. But the average house price here is now somewhere like 1.7 million. For a ordinary mum and pop 3-bedroom house, you're probably paying 1.2, 1.3 million. That's just not sustainable for an average family with 1.5 incomes and 3 kids and the like. We tried very hard to do something about this when I was mayor, established the mayoral task force on housing, came up with a model called Secure Home, where local housing trust own the land. So the folk are only paying for the house itself and paying a peppercorn rental on the land. A number of those houses have been constructed. I think it's up to a couple of hundred or so now, but only scratching the surface. Still got a long way to go. Where does the responsibility lie? Yes, it is the council's problem, it's the employer's problem, and it's government's problem. So somewhere between the three parties, they've got to find a fix for it, because you cannot have people sleeping in cars.
Obviously, with the population growth there is other kinds of demand on other basic infrastructure, like the pipes and the demand for water. They seem to be ongoing issues as well. They're all part of the same matrix, I guess?
Yeah, absolutely. We are facing ageing infrastructure, as a lot of centres around New Zealand are. You've also got to remember that Queenstown started off as a sort of mum and pop holiday place, and a lot of the plumbing and underground works we've done pretty much, let's dig a hole here and put a pipe in. And we back in my time when we redid the downtown part of Queenstown, people moaned about how long it took. Well, it took it that long because every time we dug a hole, we found another cable or a pipe that we didn't know was there, and so then you got to follow that through and fix it. But well publicised problems with sewage at the present time. Council are doing their best to resolve it, but that is simply a factor of rapid growth. So a system that was designed and planned along the numbers of people we had at the time and likely to come has way been exceeded and just creaking under the strain.
Finally, Jim, looking to the future, is there ever any concern that the growth and demand of Queenstown for that high-end tourism means that one day it's just not going to be a place for Kiwis to go to?
We are an international resort. We are a major contributor to New Zealand's economy. And we are really the only resort New Zealand has. You could argue we are the only resort that New Zealand and Australia have.
Yep.
So we will become more attractive for internationals, and yes, sadly that will mean it will be more expensive and less affordable for Kiwis to come to. But that is a price that perhaps we have to pay for the greater good of the New Zealand economy. At the present time, for a variety of reasons, Americans are flocking here in droves. And I suspect if it wasn't for the ban on foreign property buyers, we'd have a queue at the 50k limit trying to buy property here.
Right.
So it's kind of the way the place is going. Sad but true.
And that wraps up this episode of the NBR Podcast. To see more of the NBR's focus on local government elections, head to nbr.co.nz. Candidates will be confirmed on August the 8th. Voting opens September 9. Thanks to content producers Joseph Hisayasu and Jacob Latham. Links to any social media clips used are in the description. Up next, fractional home ownership and a New Zealand dollar-based cryptocurrency. Two of the fintech ideas being allowed to play in the Financial Markets Authority's new sandbox. What even is that? I'm Simon Shepherd and we'll explain it all next episode.